Hello and welcome. My name is Duncan from CR Kennedy. This is a Uniview ANPR camera guide. We're going to be covering how to get the best results from the camera and setup. So this follows on from a video I did earlier on, which was for the unboxing of the camera. So with that said, it's going to be a bit of a long video because there's a lot of information to go through. If you're looking for specific information on how to set it up, you can always skip through to the bits that are relevant for you. Or like me, you can grab a cup of tea, settle in and watch it from start to finish. Okay, let's go. So we've had a lot of really good feedback from customers that have installed this camera and installers alike that have set up and done the commissioning of it, but we've had a lot of questions, and that's why we're doing this video on how to get the best results from the camera. It's a very, very good camera, gives you good results, lots of configuration to get the best results from the camera, and yeah, obviously it's a very good price point as compared to other cameras that are probably out there on the market. So just a quick recap on the camera itself. It is a 2 megapixel camera. It's based on the IPC262, but it's a specific model. It's not just a firmware upgrade. So you do need to get the, if you need the ANPR function, you need the ANPR camera. You can see the product code there on the screen. So it's a 2 megapixel camera. This is the bit I really like about it. It has a 10 times optical zoom, so 4.7 to 47 mil zoom on it. So lots of options for installing the camera to get the images that you require, either near or far away, because you've got that motorized zoom in there going backwards and forwards. Other things to point out on here, it's a PoE camera, which is very, very useful. So you can install it straight into the PoE port on the NVR or a PoE switch, and I would recommend doing the latter. So the reason for that is that it allows you to access the camera directly. You can add it to the cloud as a device, or you can give it a fixed IP address, or use DDNS services if you want to do port forwarding. There are a lot of the advanced functions on the camera settings itself which you can't access from the camera settings through the NVR. So a lot of the shutter speed, for instance, and the IR settings you can only get to from the camera image settings itself directly from the IP address of the camera. So that's why I recommend you use a PoE switch for this particular device. Okay, so other requirements apart from the camera itself is you need a 302 series or higher recorder. It needs to be a B series. To give you an idea, we've been selling these B series recorders about the last 12 to 18 months as of July 2019, as it is now. So if you've bought a recorder in that sort of time scale and it's a 302 series, the chances are it will be a B model. You can also use the 304 or 308. The reason for that is those recorders have the database function built into them, and that's what we're going to be setting up and configuring when we do this use the ANPR camera, as you can see. Okay. So the way the ANPR camera works is you have a detection zone which you configure, and in that detection zone it reads or it looks for text, which it then converts to ASCII code, which is effectively the optical character recognition function within the camera. So you can see here it's converted the image into the text of the number plate. So just to reiterate, I'm sure I've sort of said this already, and given the length of the video, that you'll get an idea that there's a lot of features, and you need to allow appropriate time for the design, the installation, the commission, and the support of this camera. It is a Pro Series camera. It's I mean, we're used to like the turret cameras, the eyeball cameras, where we can just plug them in and they do just work. They do have a lot of VCA events and advanced configuration which we can use, but yeah, a lot of people, they're very simple to set up, which is great, but to get the best from this camera, because it is an ANPR camera, it definitely requires some time. It's not so much a plug in and walk away type camera. You're going to need to allow adequate time for the commissioning and the support and the design of the camera itself. If you do that, you're going to get better results all round. So these are the installation parameters from Uniview. A height of no less than 2 meters and no higher than 6 meters, and distance-wise between 2 and 35 meters, because you've got that 10 times optical zoom on there. Personally, I've got it at 30 meters. I think that's probably as far as I would be comfortable going, but they do say up to 35 meters. But yeah. The important thing here is the horizontal pixel, and I'll show you how to measure that when you install the camera in a moment. So you need a horizontal pixel width of between 100 and 300 to get accurate results. Okay. Some of the other things is the horizontal and vertical angle, no more than 30 degrees, and if you're on a wonky road, then the tilt angle is no more than 5 degrees. Okay. So in this example here, we've got nice control conditions. We're controlling where the cars are coming into the channel here, and we know that the number plates are going to be in the detection area around here. So we've got, you know, very accurate results that we'll be able to get from that, because we're controlling the conditions. The bollards, the speed ramp here is going to control the speed of the vehicle, so we're able to channel the vehicle in, and we know it's going to be at a lower speed, so we're going to get super accurate results. Not always, you know, we're not always going to have this sort of ideal situation, but you know, that's a very good example of where the ANPR camera could be used, for instance. So as I said earlier on, I mentioned that it's probably better to put it onto a PoE switch, and the reason for that was you can access those advanced image settings from the camera directly. If you want to add it as a EZ view device on the cloud, you can just copy and paste the registration code here. So you just go into the camera settings, go under EZ Cloud, and you can go log into your account, copy it, add a new device, and paste that registration code in, and that device will be added as a device that you can access remotely, just the same as you can your NVR. So very handy for when you're doing nighttime configuration. You don't want to be on site at late at night when it's dark, trying to get the best settings for the camera at night. Much easier to do that when you're at home and remotely accessing from your computer. Okay, so qualify the image. So as you can see here, I've drawn a box around a number plate. Let me just show you how I've done that in real time. So I'll show you another good little tip as well. Let me just bring up my recorder. So I'm just going to go into Playback here, and I'm going to access my ANPR camera, and I'm going to go back to Friday. And you can see here I've got all these events. Okay, these events here are pretty much my number plates, or where it's detected a number plate. So if I click play here, for instance, just a random one, and hopefully I should see a vehicle. Might have happened just before, actually. There we go. So there's one that coming in there. There's another one coming in here. So I can just click pause. Let's just step it forward a little bit. I've just drawn, I know that my detection area is about here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a snapshot here, and I'll just open that snapshot. So here's my snapshot. So just open that image up, and then I can edit. I think I can do open with, and trusty old Microsoft Paint. There's my image in Microsoft Paint, and I can use this select tool here as I showed you on the slide, and you can just draw a box around the number plate, and down here, look, it's going to give me my pixel density. So that's the way you get your horizontal width, to make sure that you're within those installation parameters of between 100 and 300. So this is probably about 30 meters away, so you can see what I was saying about earlier on. I'm right on the limit there. I'm just reaching the minimum requirements, but it is working very, very well indeed. And the recent update they did for this firmware for this camera allows you to set the minimum and the maximum size of your number plate horizontal pixel width. So we'll show you that in a minute. So that's the way you measure your horizontal pixel. Okay. The tip I was showing you and how I get all these playback events here is that when you go into the setup, this is on the actual NVR itself, and I'm going to contradict myself later on in my slides, and I haven't changed it, I've just realised, so I will fess up to that right now. But if you go down to camera and motion, and I select my ANPR camera here, you can see what I've done here is I've just drawn a line of motion detection, and I've put the sensitivity to low, and I've switched to motion on, and then trigger actions is to record. So that way I know that when something crosses there, which is almost certainly going to be a vehicle because of where it's positioned, I'll have a motion event. So I'll be able to go to playback, see my normal recording, and then motion events will be in red. And I found that works really, really effectively. As you can see here, I'll go back to a particular day. I can zoom in on my events. So here's an event here, and I can just click on play, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a vehicle. But you can see here's my vehicles coming in and out as they're detected. So works reasonably well. I found that to be very useful. The reason I do it that way is because the database itself sits on the NVR, so you can only search for number plates and those type of events from the recorder itself. Hopefully in the future Uniview will be adding that functionality to the web interface. As you can see under here, we've got smart function and we've got the vehicle function here. So it sort of makes sense to me that they'll be adding it to there in the future as well. The same goes for the VMS EZ station. Again, we can't do a search on the recorder database from the EZ station as of yet, as of recording this, but it's probably going to be only a matter of time that function is added there as well. So let's go back to my slides and we'll move forward. So yeah, I've put here ensure motion detection is turned off, and as I just showed you, it is actually, I actually use it turned on, so I probably just need to update that. WDR is an important one. We do want to have that switched off because we're going to be controlling the shutter speed of the camera, because the shutter speed is going to be very important, as I'll explain later on. So just ensure that that is switched off, because the way WDR works, it's if you've got a very bright image and everything is silhouetted in the background of that image because of the bright light coming into the camera sensor, then the way WDR works is it takes a very short exposure, a very fast shutter speed, and a very long exposure, and it combines the two together to give you an image where it compensates for that strong light coming into the image sensor and gives you brings everything into light. Okay, third setting is set smoothing to clear. This is actually on the recorder itself. We don't want blurry images, we want clear, crisp, sharp images. Set the bit rate to a VBR. I'd always use variable bit rate. This is so that you're not wasting bandwidth when nothing's happening, and obviously consuming the bandwidth or the space on your hard drive. Stream type, normal and event. This is actually a good little setting. I'll just show you that on the recorder itself. If you're not aware of that, this is a good little tool tip. So if we go into setup and I select my camera and go to encoding, and I'll select my ANPR camera as I've done here, you can see here you've got stream type, normal and event. So normal is when nothing's happening, and event is when an event is happening, such as a VCA event and ANPR event. So under normal conditions, I've got variable bit rate, and I've got the bit rate set to low. So it's always going to be recording, but it will record at a lower bit rate. So very useful that I don't miss anything from the camera, but I'm not consuming bandwidth on my network and consuming space on my hard drive. But when it does detect an event, obviously I want to make sure that I've got the best quality image that's being recorded. So that's an event, and you can see there it ups the bit rate to 3 megabits. So that's normal and event recording. Very, very useful little feature. Okay. U-code, for this particular camera, I always recommend switching it off. 25 frames per second and an iframe of 50. You can actually go lower than 25 frames. You know, I think I've got mine set to 15. It really does depend on the speed of the vehicles. So the faster the vehicles are moving, the higher the frame rate you want, because you've got more chance of capturing an image of that vehicle where you can have a crisp, sharp number plate. Whereas if you've got a slower frame rate, the vehicle's obviously moving faster, you get a trail If you do playback, you'll just see a trail where the vehicle has just moved across the image while that frame has been recording. So you get a blurry image, and it's not going to capture the number plate whatsoever. So as I've just been talking about here, I've got this is an example of shutter speed. So shutter speed is how fast the shutter opens and closes, how much light it lets into the image sensor at the back of the camera. So for a low light situation, we have a very slow shutter speed where we keep the shutter open and we let more light into the camera, and that way we get an image even when it's very, very dark. But for fast moving images, this is no good, because the vehicle is probably going to, or the object's going to move from A to B while that shutter is still open, and you get that horrible trail that I talked about and a blurry image. So the computer is not going to be able to read a number plate from a blurry image. So we actually want to be able to control the shutter speed and use a faster shutter speed depending on the speed of the vehicle, and that's where it's a bit trial and error and knowledge, and just working out what the best settings are for your particular circumstances where you're installing a camera. So yeah, so you say 10 frames per second, not as smooth as perhaps 25 frames per second. So this is actually quite a handy little example. I'll just show you that. So you can see here we've got 30 frames per second playing on the top person as he walks along, and then the middle one is 10 frames per second. There's actually not a huge amount of difference. So if your vehicle is moving at 10-15 miles per hour or kilometers an hour, depending where you are in the country, in the world, that's probably going to be pretty accurate, enough frames per second, maybe even 15. 1 frame per second, as you can see, the person's moved quite far across the image that's being recorded by the camera, so that would be no good at all for an ANPR camera. So if you're in doubt, a higher frame rate is probably going to be better to use. Right, so image parameters, this is where it gets really important. We'll probably spend a bit of time here talking about daytime image parameters and nighttime image parameters. You're going to be using different image parameters based on the time of day, and then using, well, I use a schedule. You can use the lux setting on the camera to trigger it, but the most easiest way of doing it is using a schedule, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. So highlight, the camera itself comes with road highlight compensation, so yeah, you definitely want to switch that on, and the way you do that is you use scenes up here. So you select a scene that's got road highlight compensation, and you'll turn it on that way. Then you've got things like brightness, saturation, contrast, all those sort of things. You'll probably want to play with those settings. Exposure mode, I'll go through my settings. There's some settings here. But yeah, for night time, I prefer to use a shutter speed of between 1 and 8,000 and 1 to 1,000. And the way the shutter speed works, so if you've got a shutter speed of 1 by 25, for instance, that's 0.4 of a second. So the higher the number, the faster the shutter is going to be opening and closing. Lower the compensation, so that reduces an overexposed image. You've also got white balance. There is one for sodium lamp, which was very useful for my particular installation. And then I've got a schedule set. So let me bring down my image settings a moment. Just bear with me, and I'll just bring those settings down. So this is my camera here. So you can see this is a good example of nighttime, for instance. 6:57. Unfortunately, as I said, it's winter here, so it's dark by 7 o'clock. But you can see here it's reading the number plate very, very well indeed. No problems at all converting that into text which can be searched. And here's some of the other number plates on here as well. So it reads them, no problem at all. If you go into setup and go, this is on the camera itself, and if I go to image, okay, you can see here this is all grayed out. This is because I'm using scenes, and you'll definitely want to use scenes when you're setting up the ANPR camera. So I'll just untick this so I can get into my scenes, and I'll drop down and expand it. Now I'm actually only using 2, but you can have up to 5 scene settings. Every installation, every set of circumstances is going to be different. You choose how many that you need to do, but I'm actually using 2. I'm using the default scene, which is what it's going to be on when it's not on the schedule scene. So I set a schedule for my nighttime settings, and when it's not on the schedule's not active, it automatically goes back to the default scene. So that's how I'm using 2 scenes. So firstly, how do I set a schedule? So you can see here everything that's ticked. If I tick it, it will be used within my scene setting. Okay, so this one is enabled because I've got it ticked, and if I click on the schedule, you can see here I've got my schedule. So it will be on from 12 o'clock to 6:30, and then from 5:30 to midnight. The way scheduling work, which is a little bit weird, if you've done alarms, this is probably second nature to you, but with the schedule, the clock starts at midnight, and then it works its way around the whole 24-hour cycle. So when you're doing a schedule within the software, you have to think like the software. You start at midnight, go around to 6:30, okay, on, and then at 6:30 a.m. I'm going to switch it off, and then you do a new line, so it switches on in the evening at 5:30 and goes all the way around to the midnight setting. And that's what I've done there. Okay, it's one of those things, easy once you've seen it once, it makes sense, but when you're doing it and you're trying to set it like you would think it'd be logically, it will just tell you no, and it won't let you set it. Okay, so first of all, I'll go through my daytime settings, which I've got here. I'm using road highlight compensation. You can see there's lots of other settings there, so you choose what's right for you, but I found that road highlight compensation works very, very well. I've adjusted my image and saturation. Now, this camera I've configured to be an ANPR camera. I am not using it for an overview image or anything like that. It's not a dual purpose camera. It is specifically there for ANPR functionality. Okay, so if your images look darker, but they're capturing the number plates really, really well, then it's doing its job. Don't try to make it a dual purpose so that you get great images, which you know, nice sharp crisp images from it, but it's no good at reading number plates. It sort of defeats the purpose. So I've adjusted these ones. I'm not going to go through them. They speak for themselves, brightness, contrast, and things like that. Exposure settings. Now, I've had to play around with these settings just to work out what's best, but I use a mixture of low motion blur and manual to adjust my exposure settings. Exposure is the same as shutter speed, by the way. They just call it exposure on here, but it's effectively a shutter speed. So you can see there's my shutter speed set. I've got compensation. I've just reduced that. That's why I've got a slightly darker image here. I've set the day-night mode, so the ICR cut filter is set to day. So it's mechanically got the filter switched on. It's not going to go into black and white mode because it's just going to do day mode. I do the opposite at night time. On my night settings, I've got it set to just night, which is the black and white, when the mechanical filter is removed, and you just get the black and white IR images from the camera. Highlight compensation, that's the headlights or light going straight into the image sensor. Smart illumination, I'm not losing illumination obviously during the day, so I've got that switched off. Focus, I've got it set to autofocus. White balance, I've got it set to outdoor, and those settings there work really well for me during the day. Then for nighttime, if I switch to nighttime, if I select up here in the scene, you can see it switched to nighttime mode. It's gone into black and white up here, and you can see all these settings have just changed slightly. My exposure settings, as I said before, I've now got it set to custom, and I've got the speed of 1/8000, so a very fast shutter speed, and 1:1000. That basically means that less light is going to be going into the image sensor. So basically everything, I mean, this is on during the day, but at night time you're just going to get a pitch black image there. But when a car comes in, the IR will reflect off the number plate really, really well. Or I found that vehicles have lights underneath the number plates as well. It will read those really, really well without glaring up too much. So it does its job. It reads the number plate very, very well, but everything else around it is black. So no good as a dual purpose observational type camera. For that, you'll need another, turret camera or an eyeball camera, something like that, bullet, for instance. Slow shutter, I've got that switched to off. Compensation, again, I've switched that right down because I just want
the number plates. I'm not interested in having a nice bright image. Highlight compensation intensity, got that switched to maximum. That's when, so the vehicles I've got actually come over a ramp, sorry, and you'll get that bright light going straight into the image sensor from the headlights. So having that switched on to maximum really helps compensate for that. Smart illumination, this time I've got it on. I mentioned the lights underneath the number plates. I found that it really helps with having the smart illumination on, because it doesn't overexpose the image with the bright light going onto the number plate, because number plates are obviously reflective as well. So that helps. Focus, I've got it to manual. The reason for that is that, you know, I find that when you switch from daytime to night mode, you find that the camera, if it's on auto, it'll do that. It will go backwards and forwards, and at night time it's got nothing to fix on to actually do the autofocus. So obviously I don't want that happening, so I've switched mine to manual so that doesn't happen. And then white balance at night, there is actually a setting here for sodium lamp, which there are lamps, street lights, literally just outside the gates here. So that works very, very well indeed. Okay, and advanced fog is off. So I've got those two settings set up. This one here, the nighttime setting, I dialed in over a few evenings and just worked out what settings work best for me. And these settings are not cookie cutter settings that you'll be able to copy and paste. You'll have to sit down and work out what's best for your particular requirements and your lighting conditions where your camera is installed. Once you've got that done and I've got my schedule set, all I'm going to do is click the box here, enable auto switching, and you can see it switched back to my daytime, my default setting, which is the day settings, and my camera is all set up and ready to go. So if I go back to my slide here, you can see that's the settings that I talked about. So these are examples of my nighttime settings. You can see there, that's that light I was talking about underneath the vehicle. Keep WDR off, as I said earlier on, that's important. Here I've obviously talked about the schedule, which I've just talked about and showed you how that works. If you can see the number plate clearly in the live view, the accuracy of the recognition should be over 95%, and I've certainly found that to be my experience as well. Use scene settings, as I've explained, gain, shutters, day-night sensitivity, all those settings you're going to want to be utilising to get the best results for the ANPR function. Okay, so that sort of covers daytime and nighttime settings. I was going to split this into two videos, but to be honest, I think it's all relevant. So I'm just gonna carry on now and just do the setting up of the LPR function. So there are two parts of this. One is you configure those settings on the LPR camera itself, and then secondly you configure the LPR camera added to the database, or you create the database on the recorder. So firstly I'm going to do the camera setting. So you can see here again, this has to be done from the camera. You can't do it from anywhere else. You have to do it from network login on the camera itself. So you want to go to traffic monitoring, and you want to draw your detection area. And you can see here, this is a new function that I talked about in the latest firmware, where you can draw, you can actually enter the minimum detection area, minimum detection plate size, the horizontal pixels that I talked about for your number plate, and you can set the maximum there. These are just boxes that you just draw on randomly. In fact, I will bring up my camera again. Actually close the camera, so let me just open it up for you again. Just bring that camera down. So if I go to setup and go to intelligent, here's my traffic monitoring. Okay, these are the settings that I just talked about on the slide. Draw detection rules. So I draw my detection box. So here I can just adjust the size of the box. And then you've got minimum plate area. This is my box up here. So if I wanted to make it bigger, I could just drag this box and make it bigger. In my particular scenario, I don't need to make it any bigger. It doesn't matter where these boxes are, by the way. They're just something you're just drawing just to set the parameters of the horizontal pixels for the number plate. So Yeah, and here you can set the maximum, and then when you do that, it works out the so you got minimum plate, maximum plate, and it works out the best plate width as well. So these are just boxes you can move around. Doesn't matter where they are on the screen. Once you've done that, you click on OK, and you click OK, and then it should save it. Up here, click Save, and that will save the parameter to the camera. Snapshot handling is when it detects the number plate, it's going to take a picture of the vehicle coming through. So yeah, generate passing record, and show a small color photo of the plate. Makes sense that I can't see any reason why you would ever have those switched off, but there we go. Vehicle parameters, so license plate credibility. There are some settings. I have actually got a handout sheet which I cover when we run courses at CR Kennedy. So you can get a copy of that where I talk about more detail about the license plate credibility. But basically, the more credible the plate, the more likely it is to be recorded as an event. So if you find that you're getting loss of inaccurate results, you might need to increase that license plate credibility so that it's not just reading lesser qualified text. And then photo, here you can like you can with the with ordinary cameras, you can put your detection areas on here. You can move these boxes around. You can put what you want to display. So I've got time, rego, camera ID, things like that. So it records that on-screen text information with the number plate of the camera when it takes a snapshot. So that's the configuration of the actual license plate detection area. The next thing we need to do is the database side of it. So you need to do it on the camera, as I said, and then you need to do it on the recorder. It doesn't matter which order you do it in, but that's the order that I generally do it with. So go down to System and Server, and here is the IP address. So you just put in the IP address of your recorder. You put in the server port. So the default port is 5073. You need to change the platform communication type. I think by default it's set to Uniview. You'll want to change that to GAT 1400. Device number, or the device number is actually the name of the database. So when we configure this on the recorder, we need to put that same database name into the recorder as well. Device ID, you can have up to 8 ANPR cameras on the same recorder if you wanted, and the device ID is a way of uniquely identifying those within the database. Each one has to be unique, obviously, for each camera, and I believe it must be a minimum of 8 characters. So I just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Username and password, that's for the recorder itself. So you set it up there, and you click on Save, and that will save those settings for you. And then you go into your recorder, and I'd always do this from so just go into my recorder, click and log in. One of the annoying things that I have found, and hopefully Uniview do fix that, is you have a plugin, you have your ActiveX plugin to allow you to get the video enabled. The plugin that's for the ANPR camera is different to the one that we're using on the recorder. So hence it asks me every time I log into the recorder, if you want to see the video settings, you've got to download the plugin. But then when I log back into the camera, you have to download the plugin for the camera itself. Again, something I have fed back to Uniview, and hopefully they'll resolve that shortly. So in this instance, I don't need the video, so I'm just actually going into the setup and configuration, so I won't download the plugin. I'll keep it for the camera. So again, same thing. This time I'm going into platform, which is my database. This is where you put the database name again. The port number 5073 is the default, and here's my camera, and there's my unique device ID. So when I click on there, you can just enter the device ID. So once you've entered all that information, you click on Save, and the camera will show as online. If it's online, the connection is all working, and you're going to be capturing and recording those number plates to the database. Here's another one that I set up earlier on. It's actually offline now because I have the camera here. So that one is shown as offline. So yeah, pretty simple to set up, not too much to it, to be honest. So back to my slides. As you can see, snapshot handling, the server name. So I'll just leave these on the screen. So if you need to, you can pause the information. And then the configuration on the recorder this time. So you put in database ID, port number, your device ID for your ANPR camera. You can have up to 8, remember, and then you click on save. And it should show as online when it's all configured correctly. Okay, and when that's done, you'll have, like this video show here, you'll be able to search for number plates. You can only do this, as I said, currently from the NVR itself, which is hopefully going to be remedied, or they'll do an update to the software soon, and we'll be able to do searches via the either EZ station or hopefully from the web interface as well. I think that would be a very useful feature. At the moment, I've set it up with that motion trigger as I showed you, so at least I can go into Playback and I can see all my ANPR events as red lines on the Playback bar. But with the database function, you can actually search for number plates. So you can put in the first letter or first 3 letters of a number plate, and it will show you all the cars with those characters in the number plate for that particular date range. So this is over a day, and you can click on the corresponding video and you can play that video back. You can back the video up. So yeah, that works really well. You can do a search on all vehicles coming through and all the number plates. And this is the table view. This is actually when I was just setting it all up, so I'm actually getting a lot better results from this now. But when you first set it up, you'll probably see, I mean, in my particular instance, I was capturing a lot of sign writing on vehicles because I was capturing across quite a large entranceway, and the vehicles would go side on through the detection area. So unfortunately, I was capturing quite a lot of text. But we've managed to improve the accuracy of that now with the configuration that I've done over the last few days. You've also got whitelist and blacklist. So whitelist is you can add number plates into the recorder, and yeah, it will allow you to trigger events based on whitelist events. So if it was connected to, for instance, a automated gate, and you wanted to put the customers and family cars into the whitelist, then when it read those number plates, you can have it trigger the automated gate to open, which is just a normally open, normally closed relay. So very useful to do that. Okay, another way you can do searches, you can do smart playback as well. So you can select the camera, go to smart, select your camera and do smart playback, and it will bring up a list of those VCA events that it's detected. A VCA event is effectively the reading of an ANPR. So you can see here in this video, I've got my events here as little green lines indicated when you do a search. Whitelist and blacklist. If you've got a large number of cars that you want to import into the database for whitelists, perhaps this is at a place of work, and you want all the staff cars to be in the whitelist. Instead of entering them all manually directly into the recorder, you can export an Excel spreadsheet from the recorder, and then you can just enter all the information in there and then just import it at the end. So that's quite an nice and easy way of doing it. And then you can set trigger actions, as I said, for opening automated gates. And that's just a quick example of how that would work with the alarm output on the back of the camera. So on the back of the camera, you've got your tail of cameras here. One of them will be the alarm output, and it's just a normally open, normally closed relay, and you just configure what the default state is, whether that is open or closed. And you can also have an input to the camera as well. So that's pretty much it. I've got some questions there. Yes, you can go through if you like. But that's pretty much the presentation and the training for setting up the ANPR camera. I hope you found that useful. Please, as always, if you have any comments, questions or feedback, please leave them in the comments section below. more than happy to assist. And yeah, happy configuring of your ANPR camera. Thank you.
CRK, Professional Precision.